Hey BookTube! Today I have a review for you. Let the Sky Fall by Shannon Messenger, narrated by Podehl and Kristen Leigh. I loved this story. It was refreshing, it was new, it was entertaining, it was fun. It had so many good things about it. Basically, it's about this 17-year-old guy named Vane Weston, and he has survived an F5 tornado. Nobody knows why, least of all him. He was young, like 5, when this happened. His parents were killed, but the big bad guy who caused the tornado thinks he is dead. Well, actually, no. He was rushed off. His memory was basically wiped, and he was hidden so that the bad guy would never find him. Audra is the girl who she's given her life to guard him, and she is an air elemental called a sylph. She basically knows how to control the air. Well, she has sworn to guard him, and she does something that inadvertently lets the bad guy know where he is. Now, he is very critical to the story because he's the last remaining survivor of the Western clan. The sylphs are divided up into north, south, east, and west, and each one speaks a language that the other ones don't know. He's the last remaining Western sylph, and so he's the only one that knows how to speak that language because it's lost. And he doesn't remember, so she has to get him to remember and to learn all about being a sylph, which is all new information for him because he has no idea. He's been living with his adopted parents, and he's just a regular guy with a regular life. He can't figure out why he can't keep a girlfriend, so that's very entertaining. Audra is forced to help him remember who he is and what his power is, and then basically that leads to opening him up to the bad guy, and then having to defeat the bad guy, and who's in league with the bad guy, who's on the good people's side, who's not. And then also you have this kind of romance developing between he and Audra, because she's been in his dreams his whole life, basically aging right along with him, and he finally finds out she's real, and then he falls in love with her, and we go from there. So 5 basic things I loved about this story. First of all, it was a completely new take on mythological creatures. I had never heard of a sylph. It's an elemental creature that can control the air, and they're also known as windwalkers. Well, when I read windwalkers, I thought maybe they were affiliated with like Native American mythology, but no. In Western mythology, they're just elemental beings that control the air. So I love that. I love that there was a whole new hierarchy created, basically a government and an army. There were kind of clans, north, south, east, and west. They all spoke different languages. There were guardians. I loved that it wasn't mermaids or fairies or werewolves or vampires or anything. It was new, which was so refreshing. Second thing was, I loved all the action. It's very easy to visualize what they're doing because they're working with air. So it's like air currents and, whirlwinds, tornadoes, strong winds. Every time Audra would teach Vane kind of a new technique, it was so interesting because you could really visualize what was happening. So I loved that. The big action scenes were really fantastic. They just carried the story along. It was so well paced. It just kind of moved and moved and moved, never dragged. Also, the plot twists that went along were relatively unpredictable. Third thing were the characters. I loved Vane. He's just a regular guy. But the thing I loved the most about him was that he was not a wimp. Like, he knew that Audra was the expert when it came to controlling the wind and teaching him about how to do that. He let her take charge of the teaching, but he didn't let her take charge of him. And I really liked that, because I think that in those situations, sometimes the guy can tend to like wimp out completely and kind of be like, oh, I gotta follow this girl. Audra, on the other hand, was this wonderful girl who is ridden with guilt. She just completely thinks everything is her fault. She has a very bad relationship with her mother. Her mother puts a lot of blame on her shoulders that really isn't deserved. So she carries around a lot of heaviness, a lot of a burden related to who she is and what she has to do, her job as Vane's guardian and teaching him, and a lot of stuff. And so a lot of the story revolves around her slowly letting go of that guilt and Vane's part in that. And so that just made her really sympathetic and yet really strong. She's a total badass. So I loved that. Fourth, the romance was good, but it wasn't central. I mean, it wasn't like the book's a romance. I did find myself saying, oh, for crying out loud, just kiss her already. But that tension was kept throughout the story. And really, they were more friends. There was less of a romantic connection there and more of a friend connection. And I really like that because I love it when they get to be friends first and then they're like, oh, I think I'm in love with you, which is very cool. You got much more focus on the action and Vane learning all these things about what he can do. And number 5, the narration. I loved the narration. It was done by Nick Podehl and Kristen Leigh. And so you got 2 voices. First of all, Nick Podehl is phenomenal as a voice actor. Probably the best thing I can say about these 2 people is that they didn't just read it to you. They acted it. These are voice actors. And when you get that in an audiobook, it just enhances it so much. So Nick's voice that he gave to Vane was just perfect. Kristen's voice for Audra was, I wouldn't say equally perfect, but I really got a sense of who Audra was. And especially with all the angst that Audra has. The only one thing I didn't like was that some of the dialogue tended to be a little cliche. But I have to say that overall, it was a fantastic book. It was refreshing. It was a new take on a new thing. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope that you will enjoy it too. I would strongly suggest you get it on audio and take the time to listen to it because it's completely worth it. These 2 narrators are so good. They just made the book. They made it really, really that much better. That's it for now. So thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.